In the quiet sprawl of suburban Vermont, what appeared to be a routine investigation unraveled into something far darker. A nationwide web of ideology, manipulation, and bloodshed. This was no ordinary criminal case. It was the exposure of a radical group that had grown in the shadows, bound together by a twisted philosophy and a charismatic leader. The group called themselves the Zizians. At the center of it all stood Jack Ziz LaSota, a former computer engineer with a sharp mind and a dangerous vision. He wasn't a traditional cult leader, at least not in the beginning. Ziz preached a chaotic blend of beliefs: anti-technology, anti-capitalism, veganism, radical gender politics, and a deep hatred for artificial intelligence. His rhetoric attracted a unique crowd, those who felt unseen, misunderstood, or furious at the modern world. Together, they built something resembling a utopia, or so they thought. What began as a loosely organized group of idealists quickly escalated into something much more dangerous. The Zizians believed that the system was broken, that the world was heading toward collapse, and that violence was not only justified but necessary. They didn't just talk revolution, they acted on it. From petty crimes to calculated attacks, they started leaving a violent trail across state lines. And when the law came knocking, the group closed ranks and retaliated. One of the earliest signs that something was deeply wrong came in 2022 in Tucson, Arizona. Curtis Lind, a landlord with no criminal background, became an unexpected target. His only mistake? Trying to evict a group of tenants, Zizians, who hadn't paid rent in months. What should have been a civil dispute turned into a nightmare. Lind was stabbed repeatedly in a brutal home invasion by two cult members, Suri Dao and Somni Letham. Miraculously, he survived. But the group wasn't done with him yet. As Lind prepared to testify against his attackers, the Zizians saw him as a threat that needed to be eliminated. In February 2025, just before the trial, Curtis Lind was murdered in cold blood. Stabbed to death, this time with fatal precision. The message was clear. Anyone who stood against them would be silenced. Police arrested Dow and Letham again, this time along with a third member, Maximilian Snyder. But by then, the FBI realized they were dealing with more than a single murder. Across the country, other disturbing incidents had begun to surface, each with one strange link: ties to Ziz and his growing digital manifesto. One member, Michelle Zyko, had gone viral years earlier for her radical videos, but had since vanished into the group's underground network. She resurfaced in 2025, arrested after her foster parents were found dead under suspicious circumstances. She wasn't alone. Other members were showing up on FBI watch lists, connected to violent acts, weapons stockpiles, and encrypted group chats advocating for revolution. Then came the Vermont shootout. In March 2025, two heavily armed Zizians, Teresa Youngblood and Ophelia Bauchholt, were tracked to a rural safe house. When federal agents moved in, the standoff turned deadly. A U.S. Border Patrol officer was killed in the gunfire. Bauchholt died on the scene. Youngblood was captured, but not before revealing chilling insights about the group's inner workings. She described a plan not just to survive off-grid, but to dismantle what they saw as a corrupt civilization, piece by piece. The more investigators dug, the more horrifying the story became. The Zizians weren't operating in isolation. They were spreading across cities, hiding under aliases, recruiting online, and coordinating through encrypted platforms. Their ideology wasn't just fringe, it was weaponized. And behind it all was Ziz, whose influence had turned disillusioned individuals into loyal soldiers. As pressure mounted and the body count rose, federal agencies launched a full-scale investigation into the Zizians. What they uncovered was a decentralized network of cells, small groups operating under Ziz's doctrine, each carrying out tasks independently yet driven by the same warped vision. The FBI began tracking financial activity, intercepted encrypted chats, and mapped connections across state lines. They weren't dealing with one cult house or compound. They were dealing with a decentralized ideology. The turning point came in Maryland, where authorities tracked down Jack LaSota himself. After months on the run, he was arrested in a quiet suburb outside Baltimore alongside two core members, Michelle Zico and Daniel Blank. Inside their hideout, investigators found weapons, burner phones, propaganda materials, and detailed plans for future attacks. What shocked officials most wasn't the gear, it was the level of planning. This wasn't just spontaneous rebellion. It was methodical, calculated. Prosecutors immediately pushed for federal charges, not just for murder or conspiracy, but for domestic terrorism. The Zizians weren't just breaking laws. They were attempting to dismantle the legal system itself. They called for jury nullification, court rejection, and refused legal representation in favor of speaking truth to power. Their court appearances became performances, interrupting judges, spewing ideology, refusing to recognize the authority of the state. As their trials began in April 2025, the public finally saw the faces behind the chaos. Dow, Leatham, and Snyder stood trial for the murder of Curtis Lind. Michelle Zico faced charges for conspiracy and obstruction. And Jack LaSota, once a man who wrote code for tech startups, now faced life in prison for inciting a domestic insurgency. The courtroom was tense. Security was tight. Supporters showed up in disguise, some attempting to live-stream court proceedings before being arrested themselves. Yet despite their efforts to control the narrative, public opinion began to shift. Former members came forward, describing how they were manipulated, isolated from family, and told that violence was the only form of liberation. They spoke of forced name changes, loyalty rituals, and late-night manifestos written by Ziz himself. These testimonies painted a disturbing picture of psychological warfare disguised as activism. Media outlets across the country began calling the Zizians one of the most dangerous ideological cults in recent history, comparing them to extremist groups from the past, but noting one key difference. The Zizians didn't need a compound. They had the internet. Despite the arrests, investigations continue. Authorities believe there are still dozens of members operating in sleeper cells, quietly existing in cities across the US, waiting for instructions. And while Ziz is behind bars, his ideas continue to spread in dark corners of the internet. Encrypted forums, underground social channels, and private servers still host his writings, reshared by believers who see him not as a criminal, but as a prophet. This case is a chilling reminder of how quickly ideology can become violence, and how fringe movements, when left unchecked, can evolve into organized threats. The Zizians were not the first group to challenge authority, but they may be one of the most digitally dangerous the FBI has ever faced. If you found this case as disturbing and fascinating as we did, don't forget to subscribe to Crime Chronicles. We uncover the darkest stories behind real crimes, cults, and conspiracies every week. Hit the bell so you never miss an update, and let us know in the comments. Do you think the Zizians are truly gone, or is this just the beginning?